The situation with ammunition is just a part of the comprehensive efforts of the ruling team to create a scenario of endless war or some sort of ceasefire that would prevent elections in Ukraine, allowing the ruling team to continue to unscrupulously manipulate financial flows. The main driving force behind this is the desire to avoid responsibility for the corruption scandals of the previous 2 years of the war. Let's examine the messages that Zelensky has been launching in the past few days, especially his interview against the backdrop of trenches, where he demandingly insists, "If you don't give us ammunition, if you don't give us money, we will lose everything, we will destroy everything, we will surrender everything to the enemy." This is a brutal story because essentially resorting to a scenario of blackmail is essentially panic. After all, before this, partners who were rational and moderate repeatedly explained to Zelensky what he needed to do to improve the state of governance in the country. However, Zelensky consistently acted against the partners, putting them in a situation where they doubted whether to give funds and ammunition to Ukraine. The Ukrainian authorities artificially delayed mobilization, in a mocking style introduced a law that was absolutely unprofessionally written. Zelensky consistently disclaimed personal responsibility for the draft law on mobilization, shifting the blame onto the Cabinet of Ministers or the Ministry of Defense. Finally, an attempt was made at the committee level to create a new draft law, for which they used the political novice Mariana Bezula, and she even managed to clash at the level of this legislative idea with the Commander-in-Chief Zelensky. When looking at the actions of the government as a whole, it becomes clear that Zelensky's government itself created a situation of failure. It made the Ministry of Defense chaotic in one dimension, the supply of ammunition from Ukroboronprom in another dimension, and all this fuss with drones yet another dimension. The most resonant operations of the security service and military intelligence, strikes on Russian territory, and we still do not know the result. We only know the plot. We do not know the details and the real effect of the strikes. There is a suspicion that the impact on objects in Russian territory is not as significant, and they are carried out in order to divert the attention of the Ukrainian society from the failures in the supply of ammunition to the combat units. Now, when we see how aggressively the occupying army is moving in Donetsk, especially in Chasiv Yar, it's just a shocking scene because the enemy has concentrated a lot of equipment and live forces, while the supply of ammunition to the Ukrainian forces, especially the artillery, is very modest. And now we have completely exhausted troops without rotation, without ammunition. For 6 months, Zelensky's government fed the military with all sorts of promises, and it all ended with the fact that the new law on mobilization does not provide for serious rotations, and even less so demobilization after 36 months. This is what the opposition insisted upon. So it turns out that General Syrsky was needed to accept Zelensky's narrative about mobilization and practically now the whole story of keeping the fighters, who are simply burnt out in the war, who have been sitting at the forefront for 2 years without breaks. All this is to be pinned on General Syrsky in an attempt to somehow save Zelensky for a part of the electorate who is not ready to mobilize. Sociologists note changes in moods people, precisely those who are most likely to be subject to mobilization, up to the age of 40. In this age group, there is a great demand for a change in government. Even for new elections, about 47% in this age group express their views, even for holding elections during the war. This is the same age group that brought Zelensky to power, because firstly, Zelensky's lies began to annoy everyone, secondly, the corruption within Zelensky's circle began to irritate the Ukrainian army, and thirdly, there was systematic work to undermine the country's defense capability in Zelensky's team. Big example is the role and place of the gaming industry in Ukraine, and why Russia and its gaming platforms were imported into Ukraine when Zelensky became president. During the war, thousands of servicemen fell into gambling addiction. I want to remind you of the story with the Lviv Arsenal Company. The company disrupted the supply of Soviet-caliber ammunition and came under investigation. And here comes information from the contractors of the Lviv Arsenal Company that all the ammunition that was reserved and paid for actually exists. They are stored in warehouses in Slovakia, and the Ukrainian side has not intended to export them for over 6 months. Here is a testimony from the owner of the Slovak company, a partner of Lviv Arsenal. I, Oleksiy Koroshayev, co-owner of the Slovak company Civitel, addressing the President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky and the Minister of Defense of Ukraine Rustem Umerov with a request to take the ammunition that is currently located in Slovakia. These shells were purchased for the armed forces of Ukraine under a contract with the Ukrainian company Lviv Arsenal. These ammunition have been paid for and ready for delivery to Ukraine since November 7, 2023. The CEO of the Slovak company Civitel has repeatedly contacted the director of the Lviv Arsenal company as a contractor, demanding to immediately take back the shells and deliver them to Ukraine, but starting from the 7th of November 23rd, Lviv Arsenal did nothing to ensure that the goods were imported into Ukraine. The CEO of the Slovak company Civitel had to write to the President, Minister of Defense, Deputy Minister of Defense, Chief Prosecutor, Ukrainian Ambassador to Slovakia, but as you can see, the shells are still in Slovakia. Once again, I appeal to Volodymyr Zelensky, to Rustem Umerov to intervene in this strange situation and help bring the ammunition to Ukraine. Today, I clearly understand that only you can solve this actually simple issue. And now let's analyze the exhaustion of the troops, the shortage of ammunition, and the creation of situations where partners begin to distrust and withhold financial assistance. Plus, there is outright raiding work, including by law enforcement, on redistributing assets within the country during the war. Moreover, the exhaustion and destruction of local self-government, the ruin of social policy ultimately lead to the country weakening, essentially lacking any living state institution where order, predictability, and foreseeability prevail. Even the security service of Ukraine has gotten caught in this web of chaos and scandals. It gives the impression that the task of Zelensky's circle is to create a scenario where the West leaves Ukraine to be devoured by Putin, bitter truth. But Ukrainians will never surrender to Putin, because then the whole of Ukraine will become nothing but Bucha, Borodyanka, Mariupol with Izium. Even thinking about it is terrifying.